All right, everyone, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to welcome everyone to today's training. My name is Greg Mastrangelo, and I am Bancroft's ACE Training and Implementation Specialist. So my role is to help train you guys on how to utilize the different features and functions within the ACE system. And since everybody is new to the ACE system that's attending this training or relatively new, I'm going to walk through some information about the ACE before we begin going into the actual website. And before I do that, I just want to do a quick introduction of myself as I will be working with you guys going forward in additional future trainings as well. So I work for the New England Center for Children. They are the ones that created the ACE system, and the ACE stands for Autism Curriculum Encyclopedia. I've been with New England Center for Children for about 15 years now. And throughout my role with the company, I've got to do a variety of different jobs. It's a school that primarily serves individuals with autism. So throughout my time, I've got to work in their residential program. We also have a day program that I've got to work in. I've worked in public schools, done some consulting, early intervention, and we also have some programs overseas that I've got to go over and participate in. One, we have a school in Abu Dhabi, so I got to go over there for a year. And then we also got to go to India for a couple of years to help set up a program there for kids that have autism and working in the program over there. Throughout my time at New England Center for Children, I've earned my master's in special education and become a VCBA. I joined the ACE department about 5 or 6 years ago. And really my role is to really just train external clients that use the system on how to utilize the different features within the website. And I have clients all throughout the United States. So I provide trainings to a variety of different types of clients. So that's just a little bit information about myself. Throughout the course of today's training, thank you guys for having your microphones on mute. But if there's any questions at any time, please feel free to let me know. You guys can either turn off your mic or turn on your mic and ask the question, or please feel free to use the chat feature located in Zoom. I'm happy to answer any questions as they come up. Some of the information we covered today might be relatively new to everyone, so please feel free if you need me to elaborate on anything. I'm happy to do so. Throughout the course of the training, I again encourage everyone to log into the system for those of you who were able to set up your account and your password. We are going to have opportunities for you guys to practice. So again, for those who were able to get onto the system, that will be a great opportunity for you guys to go in and just do some button pushing. And throughout the course of this training, we will be taking several breaks throughout. I don't know if we need the full 3 hours, but we'll make sure that we throw some breaks in there. Again, because some of this information may be relatively new. So I want to make sure that we have breaks throughout just to make sure that everybody is comfortable with the information. All right, so we are going to go ahead and begin. And before we jump into the actual website, I just have some PowerPoint slides that talk about the ACE in general. Then it's going to review some general information about the ACE system. And as we go into the website, I'm going to talk about one of the features that we just introduced. For those of you who just logged in, either during this past week, this weekend, or even today, you guys may have gotten to review this feature that sort of help guides and provide some information about the different items within the system. But I'm also going to review those just so in case there's any questions that come up, I'd be happy to answer them. Hi guys, so the ACE system is based on over 45 years of education, curriculum development, and research, again, done by the New England Center for Children. The system was developed by VCBAs, special educators, speech and language pathologists, and occupational therapists. So very much a collaborative approach to the different programs and items that you see within the system. It's used by a variety of different settings. So this includes public schools, private schools, clinics, ABA consultants, adult services, and universities. As you guys begin to use the ACE system, you're going to see that it has research-proven teaching methods for how you guys will be implementing the lessons with your individual learners. It also has a very systematic instruction with regards to how you provide instruction to the learner and how you're going to follow through that with that program to encourage independent correct responding. There is consistent language and teaching procedures throughout. So the idea behind this is, as any staff are going to be running the programs, the idea is that you guys will be implementing and following the same instructions and completing the same items within that program with that student, making sure that there's consistency throughout. We're going to talk a lot about the lessons today, but there are customizable lessons, so you can find lessons within our lesson library. But the idea is that you can go in and customize these lessons to better fit that individual learner that you might be working with. And we're going to be talking about all the different things you can customize throughout today's training. Here we'll save valuable time by using lessons within our ACE library. So basically, one of the benefits of using the ACE is that we have over 2,100 lessons already sort of developed for you guys. It provides you all the information you need to know in order to implement and run that lesson. I'm going to talk a little bit more about our lessons in our lesson library and what you can find. But basically, you don't have to go in and write or create your own lessons. You can just pull from our lesson library. Here you can collect data on the skill acquisition that you're implementing with your learners. And then that data, once it's entered back into the system, can be used to generate graphs or reports. Some of these are created automatically for you. There are other reports that you can generate manually. But basically, you can use those to visually inspect your learner's performance. So going back to our lesson library, we have over 2,100 lessons, again, already sort of written and available for you. These 2,100 lessons are broken down across 10 domain areas. I'm going to show you guys a slide that highlight those areas in just a couple minutes. But again, there's a broad, comprehensive approach to what type of lessons you can find within the system. And those lessons are broken down into 3 different teaching formats. So we have what we call discrete trial or skill acquisition lessons, incidental or naturalistic teaching, and task analysis. I'm going to show you some information about each of these, sort of what they are in more detail. And as we go through the course of today's training, I'll provide information about each of these different teaching formats as well. But please let me know if any questions come up, especially if these are relatively new teaching formats to any of you. So here's just a slide that highlights what that discrete trial instruction looks like, or skill acquisition program that you can find on the ACE. When implementing this type of program, it's a way of designing instruction to maximize skill acquisition. So the idea here is that skills are broken down into smaller units of behavior. These individual skills are taught in a highly structured teaching environment. There are multiple practice opportunities provided during each teaching session. And throughout this program type, you guys will provide help, also known as prompting. This is provided by you guys as the teachers. And the idea is that you will systematically fade these prompts out until the learner responds correctly and independently. The second program type I talked about is incidental teaching. This is a definition of what it is. So Hart and Risley defined it as when the natural environment is arranged to attract the child to desired materials and activities. The teacher is available to provide attention, praise, and instruction while the child initiates interaction with materials. So the idea behind this program type is that these are also commonly referred to as programmed opportunities. You implement this type of program when the opportunity to collect data on it either happens naturally within the environment, or you as the staff might arrange the environment to collect data on that opportunity. And here the learner first has the chance to initiate. You give them the chance to do this independently, and if needed, you then provide that help or prompting in order for them to respond correctly. And last but not least, we have our third program type, task analysis, or TA. This is a way to teach a sequence of components that make up a chain of behavior. And the goal when you're running this type of program is for the learner to perform each step in order independently. So here is where you sort of take a chain of behavior and you break it down into individual steps. And depending on what type of task analysis it is, you teach the learner each of the different steps that make up that chain of behavior. So for example, think of like a hygiene skill, washing hands, for example. You sort of take that, the steps that make up the washing hands, you break it down, and then the learner goes through and completes or learns each one of those individual steps in order until they can do the entire chain independently. All right, so throughout the course of this training, we're going to be talking about more within those 3 different program types, talking about the different procedures and terms that you guys are going to come into contact with when implementing these. But again, please let me know if any questions come up. Here's a slide that highlights the 10 areas that you can find the programs across. So again, a broad range with respect to depending on where your learner currently is. But here you can see we have discrimination skills. This is where you can go in and find some of those prerequisite skills, maybe just teaching the learner how to get ready to complete a session of instruction. For example, working on some type of attending behavior, teaching the student simple matching. Communication, this is where you can find skills, for example, working on requesting. Social skills. Academics for those learners that you might be looking for more complex level skills. Self-help skills, so again, think of those hygiene skills, for example. Health and safety. Rec and phys ed. Community goals. And then for any learner that might be older and working on vocational or transition to adulthood. So again, those 2,100 lessons are broken down across these 10 areas. Depending on what skill you're looking for, more or less, we pretty much have it within the system, but you can also sort of search by the specific areas or domains. This is highlighting our different types of data entry. We're primarily going to focus on the left-hand side, looking at what we call the lesson data sheet, as you guys will be collecting paper pencil data with your learners. We're going to be breaking this down in much more detail later on, so I'm not going to talk too much about it right now. But here's another example of it, and another screenshot that you have is what we call our full lesson plan. The difference between the two is the one on the left provides you information about the lesson that you might be implementing with the learner. And the one to the right primarily just provides information on how to complete or implement that lesson, as well as providing an area to collect and enter your data. So again, we're going to be talking more about these throughout the course of today's training, but these are some examples of items that you can generate within the system. Print out, review, and then of course have available with the learner to go ahead and collect the data. Hi guys, so our agenda for today is going into the system, highlighting some specific features and functions that you guys will be using. First, talking about some general navigation, just different ways you can sort of navigate the system, highlighting some of the different items that you're going to see on screen, the different icons and things like that. Talking about how you can select your specific students that you might be working with. And then we're going to go into what we call apps. These apps are just embedded within the website. You don't have to worry about downloading any apps from the App Store, for example. But as we go across some of those different apps, we're going to be pulling and highlighting some of the specific features and functions within those that you guys will be utilizing with your individual learners. So for example, we're going to look at some items in the Learners app, how to set up some information about your learner, as well as a feature to go in and help create some shortcuts when you guys might be implementing or activating lessons for your students. We're then going to go into the curriculum app. This is where we're going to spend the majority of our time, highlighting how to search for the different lessons within the system. There's a couple of different ways you guys can do this. how to activate those lessons that you want to work on with your individual learners, and then of course how to edit them so you can customize them to better fit that individual learner. And then talking about how to generate these data sheets so you guys can actually start collecting data with your learners. And then at the very end, just highlighting some resources within the system that are available that you guys have access to, as well as highlighting those different help resources that you can go back in and review or get some information on how to do the different features and functions that we talked about today. All right, guys, any questions so far with just a general review of the ACE system? All right. So just some general information before we go into the actual website. The website is listed down below. So for those of you who might have set up your account or your password, you guys might have already been able to go to the website and log in. But the website to go to the ACE is aceapp.org. If you guys are using a device on a regular basis, I would typically encourage you to make this a bookmark or favorite. That way you can just click on that to access the website. And anytime you're going to use the ACE system, you're always going to go directly to the website, aceapp.org. So it's entirely a web-based program. As I mentioned before, you don't have to worry about downloading any apps from the App Store. Everything will be done directly through the website. And the nice thing about this is you can use really any type of device as long as it has access to the internet in some way, shape, or form. So for example, you can use a desktop, a laptop, a tablet. You could even get on the ACE website via your phone if you wanted to sort of see what it looks like and explore. But again, as long as that device has access to the internet, you can go directly to the website. With regards to the type of browser that you're going to be using when going to the ACE website, if possible, we recommend using Chrome. That's the recommended browser to use. Safari and Firefox will work as well. Just stay away from Internet Explorer or Microsoft Edge. Those specific browsers, you might encounter errors or some issues when using the system. So if possible, Chrome is recommended, but Safari and Firefox will work as well. And one thing I just want to highlight here with regards to screen size. This really depends on what type of device you're using and how large it is. But I just want to highlight that any device that is 9 inches or larger, you guys will get a full display of the information on that device. So for example, as you guys are viewing my screen throughout the course of today, I am using a device that's larger than 9 inches. So you guys will see an example of what the full display looks like across the different apps and items as I go through them. Anything under 9 inches, so this might be like an iPad mini, or again, if you guys happen to look at it on your phone. This is primarily meant to be used with a feature that we call Teach Now. Teach Now is a way to collect paperless data. So we're not going to review that throughout the course of this training. We're going to focus on our paper pencil data entry. But I just want to highlight for any of those smaller devices, that's really what you should be using that specifically for. And when you guys do use a smaller device, even though you can do all the actions and items that we're going to highlight throughout the course of today's training, just be aware that it will require some extra clicking or navigating in order to move around the system. And a lot of the information you might have to click on, for example, specific tabs in order to go in and review what that information is. So a smaller device just requires some extra navigating and clicking because it will sort of break it down into smaller items on the page. And if you guys are using a device that allows you to toggle between horizontal or vertical view, for example, some type of tablet, I always recommend just keeping it in horizontal view. You guys will get a better display of the information on the screen where it's likely to stretch it out, where if you happen to keep it in vertical, it's going to squish the information. And again, it might just require some of those extra navigational ways to move around the system. Okay, guys, any questions before we go into the actual website? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over. I'm going to use a slightly different website throughout the course of this training. I use this for training purposes. So if you happen to see my web address, say training.asap.org, it is slightly different than the website I encourage you guys to go to. But again, you guys will always be going to asap.org anytime you're going to be using or going into the system. All right, guys, for those of you who were able to log in to the system, you guys may have already seen what the login page looks like. But once you sort of go through and set up your password and you have your account ready to go, this is what the login page will look like. It's always going to be your work email and then whatever password you created. I want to highlight that directly below the login button, there is a forgot reset password link. In the future, anytime you need to reset your password or if you forget what your password is, I would always strongly encourage staff to hit this link to go through the process of setting up your password again. The ACE will give you so many opportunities to remember what your password is. But again, if you get down to that last opportunity and you still don't really know what it is in case you guys ever forget it in the future, just go ahead and click on that forgot reset password link, and it will send you through a series of steps to go ahead and reset your password. One of those items, I just want to highlight this now because it's going to be the first task that I'm going to strongly encourage all staff to do for those of you who are already in the ACE, and then for those of you who are going to be logging on in the near future, is when you have to reset your password, it's going to ask for your security questions. There's a place that you can fill these out within the system. And again, this is going to be the first task that I'm going to encourage everyone to do. If for any reason you were able to not complete or fill out those security questions, or sometimes staff might just forget the answers to them later down the road, what's going to happen is you're going to get locked out of the system as you try to go through the process of resetting your password. And it's going to ask you to contact an admin to go ahead and reset your account. So when that happens, you basically have to reach out to one of the admins within the account. That person is then going to have to reach out to our help desk, let us know that your account's been blocked. And then our help desk will go ahead and unlock your account and allow you to go in and reset your password. But whenever that occurs, it does require those extra steps of you guys having to reach out to your admin, the admin having to reach out to our help desk, and then them having to send you some information on how to reset your account. So to prevent that from happening, as long as your security questions are answered and completed, you guys should be able to reset your password anytime in the future, whenever that action needs to be completed. So again, I'll highlight where those security questions are. And again, strongly encourage that everybody completes that before you do anything else within the system. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and log in. And for those of you who maybe have already logged in or are logging in for the first time this morning, what you may notice is a pop-up window will sort of display, allowing you to sort of get some information about the ACE system. For those of you who have already logged in and maybe used that just to go through and get some information about these different apps and icons that you see on screen, that's great. For those of you who haven't logged in just yet, when you first log in, you're going to see this pop-up message display. I strongly encourage you guys, even after today's training, to go in and sort of click on those buttons to go in and review the different apps and items that you're going to see on the screen. It's a tool that we actually just recently added that allows you to access some general information within the system on how to do different features and functions, at least especially with how to navigate and set up some items within your profile. So I strongly encourage you guys to review that. It's going to be available to you going forward. So if you sort of ask the ACE to remind you about it later on, that's okay. You guys will still be able to go in and review that. But we're going to sort of expand on that. And you're going to see sort of different areas within the system that you can sort of click on to access some more information or identify how to complete a specific task within the website itself. Now, for the purpose of today's training, even if you guys reviewed that, that's amazing. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about all the different items that you're seeing on screen, just to provide information, especially for those staff that haven't been able to log onto the system just yet. So I'll sort of talk about the different ways to navigate the different icons that you see and so forth. But typically, when you go to the ACE website and you log in, as long as you haven't made any changes to your profile or account, you are sent to what we call the app library. Now, the app library will show you all the different apps. These correspond with the different features and functions that you might be utilizing within the system. And again, you don't have to download any apps from any of the App Store. These are just apps embedded within the website. And for you guys, you're not going to see all the different apps that you do on my screen. You guys are going to see specific ones that we're going to highlight today. But it's okay, for example, if you don't see the assessments. These are tools and items that Bancroft doesn't currently use. So if you don't see those apps within your app library, that's completely fine. How my account is set up, I just have access to all the different features and functions. Throughout the course of this training, we're going to be talking about some of these different apps, going into them, highlighting the different features and functions that you can complete within them. But I'll give a quick overview of what these are and the different apps that we're going to cover today, or that you're going to see on your app library. So the first one is the curriculum app. This is where you guys probably spend the majority of your time. This is where you can go in and search for lessons within our lesson library for programs that you're going to activate for your individual learners. Once those programs are activated, there's a lot of different things you can do with them, including editing and customizing them so they better fit your individual learner that you're using that lesson for. There's other actions that you can apply to that lesson once you sort of have it set up, specific tools that you can use to monitor the learner's progress. And for you guys, this is where you can go in and access the lesson details or the lesson data sheet that you're going to use with the learner in order to go ahead and collect your data. Also, once you collect that data, you're going to go back into the curriculum app and enter that data back into the system. And once you guys complete that in the future, you're going to be able to access different ways to monitor the learner's performance across the programs that you're going to be collecting data on. All right, so we're going to jump into the curriculum app a little bit later and talk about some of those items I just reviewed. The Learners app is where you can go in and either set up some information about the learner that you're going to be working with. Again, there's a really cool tool that we're going to highlight later today that will sort of create some shortcuts for how you might set up and activate lessons in the future. And the Learners app is where you can also go in and document some information about the learner. This is sort of the first app we're going to dive into because, again, I want to highlight some of the items I would encourage all staff to complete first before you even start the process of activating lessons with your individual learners. The Reports app, we're not going to cover this today. This is something we'll probably hit further down the road. But once you, again, sort of have data collected and you are entering it back into the system, there are ways to monitor the learner's performance in which the ACE will automatically generate reports and information for you in order to do that. But then we do have a Reports app that allows you to go in and actually generate or access a variety of different reports on how you might generate the data to share that with others to show how the learner's performing on the different lessons you're working on. Okay, so the reports in the Reports app are the reports that you would go in, sort of filter out what type of information you want to be included on that report. This is where you would choose what type of report with regards to how you want to display the data or the information about the learner's data that you collected. But again, we're not going to highlight this today. That will be something that we review further down the road. You guys are going to see the Activity app. This is an item you can click on. It just provides some general information about the lessons or learners that you have access to. It's not something we're going to spend time or review today. It's an area that you can go in and sort of just see what's happening within the system. But there's other areas that we're going to highlight more specifically today that I would encourage you to go back and review with regards to items that are happening within the system, especially with regards to data that you're collecting for your learner. The resources app I will highlight towards the end of today's training. This is an area where you can go in and access some resources, very generic items. For example, we have some tools that you can sort of print out if you wanted to use those with your individual learners. Simple like schedule boards, first send boards, things like that. Token boards for any learner that might be using tokens for their potential reinforcement. We have generic data sheets when you collect paper pencil data sheets that I'll highlight and review. So just some specific items in here that you guys have access to. So I'll highlight at the end of today's training. Again, don't worry if you don't see the behavior or assessment apps on your dashboard. You're going to see them on mine just because my account has access to everything. But you guys won't see those on your specific app libraries. And then towards the end of today's training, we are also going to go into the Learning Center and Help Center. These are two apps that provide you with help resources. I'm going to talk about what you can access across each of these, as well as talking about our help desk, which I think some of you guys have already contacted with regards to trying to set up your account. So it's great that you guys already know how to reach out to them, but I'll sort of provide information on the different ways you can contact them, as well as myself in the future for any questions that might come up. Now, the app library is really your first way you can navigate the system. So when you go into the app library or you decide to use this way to navigate in the future, what happens is when you click on one of the apps that you're going to go in and utilize, it's going to bring you to what we call the dashboard for that app. And basically, once you go into that app, it's going to allow you to navigate to any of the different features or functions related to that app, depending on what you're going to be using the system for next. So for example, from the app library, if I happen to click on the curriculum app, it's going to send me in here. This will again direct me to the dashboard. And what you can see are all the different widgets. These are specific items that you can go into to complete different actions within the system related to the curriculum app. So for example, you can see this is an area where you can search for lessons to activate for your learners. This is representing what you or how many current active lessons you selected for this learner. Here's a place where you're going to go back in and enter your paper pencil data. So basically, when you're clicking on an app from the app library, it just brings you to the main dashboard to then further navigate and use whatever feature or function you want to next. Hi guys, I want to highlight next the different icons that you're going to see either in the upper right or left corner. Next to the app library, you are going to see this little profile picture. When you guys click on this and when you first logged into the system, some of you may have already seen this page. But this is going to have information about your individual account. So for example, it's going to let you know what email address you used to get into the system. Here you can always change your password. But again, you really don't need to do this until the ACE alerts you for security purposes of when the password needs to be changed. But if you ever want to, this is another area where you can do it. Please keep the language in English. And then here, most importantly, are where you're going to find your security questions. All right, so for those of you who have already logged in, hopefully you completed these. For those of you who will be logging in either this morning or in the near future, this is the first area that you should be going to. And again, completing these security questions. You guys will make up the questions and the answers. You do it for 2 questions. And once you complete those, you're going to go ahead and hit the save button in that bottom right corner. Again, very important to have these completed. That way, anytime in the future that you need to reset your password, it's going to ask you for these questions as long as you have them set up and you have the correct answers. You're going to be able to easily reset your password going forward. If not, you're going to have to go through those extra steps that I mentioned before in order to go ahead and reset your password. All right, so I'm just going to give everyone a minute. For those of you who are logged on and following along, which I strongly encourage you guys to do, just make sure that if you are able to be in the ACE system, that these security questions are completed. And if not, for anybody that is logged into the website, please take a minute or two to do so, and then we'll go ahead and continue. Hi, guys. There's one other item on your user profile page that we're not going to really review or highlight. There's this option to default to Teach Now. Whenever you guys see the words Teach Now within the system, that's our paperless data entry. We're primarily going to focus on paper pencil data entry. So I would encourage you guys to keep this defaulted as no. But again, once you have those security questions completed, just make sure to hit save. Next in the upper right corner, don't worry about the squiggly arrow. This is a feature related to the behavior app. So we're not going to be covering or reviewing that. And then the final icon that you're going to see are those 3 stacked squares in the upper right corner. This is a way to jump to the Teach Now page. Again, Teach Now, anytime you see that within the system, it's a way to collect paperless data with your learners. You could use this icon to jump to that Teach Now page. But again, we're primarily focusing on that paper pencil data entry. So we're not going to click on that icon today or this morning to review what Teach Now looks like, as we're focusing on that summary or paper pencil data entry. But I just want to highlight what that icon is and what it would direct you to if you happen to click on it. Lastly, in the upper left corner, you guys will see 3 horizontal lines. When you click on this, this is another way you can sort of navigate to different areas or items within the system. You can see that these sort of match up with the different apps in the app library. So if you want to jump to a specific app using this navigational menu, you can definitely do so. And at the very bottom of this menu is also your sign out button. I really just strongly encourage all staff to hit the sign out button anytime you guys are done utilizing the system, rather than the X in the upper right corner. That way, just in case, making sure that you completed all your actions within the website by signing out, you're correctly leaving the system, rather than hitting the X in the upper right corner, which is likely to close any tabs or windows that you have open. Any questions about navigating or the different items or icons that you see on screen? All right. All right, guys, so what we're going to do is jump into our first app. So from the app library, I'm actually going to click on this Learners app. So for those of you who are following along, go ahead and click on this app as well. Before I talk about some of the items or features that we're going to review in the Learners app, I want to highlight another way you can navigate. And when you jump into a specific app from the app library, directly below the ACE logo, you're going to see these different items appear. These are what we call quick links. And basically, they allow you to navigate to different areas within the app that you just navigated to. You could use the widgets down below, but if you know what exactly feature you want to also navigate to, you could also use the quick links above to get there as well. So again, just some little shortcuts here on navigating to the different items related to, in this case, the Learners app. And I'll show you examples of how you could either use the quick links or the widgets down below in order to jump into those different areas. Also, when I navigated outside of the app library into the Learners app, you are going to notice a purple tab display. This purple tab is always going to display whenever you're in a specific app. You won't see it when you're in the app library. But this is what we refer to as your student selector. So as you navigate through the different features and functions within the system, you're going to be able to identify and select what learner you're going to be working with. And here it's going to let you know currently what learner you have selected. And you can also use this student selector to change this profile to a different student or learner, depending on who you're going to be working with next, for example. It's very important to always make sure that you have the correct learner selected. So I always want to verify what this is or what student or learner selected before I go through and make any changes within the system, especially as you navigate to the different apps. Because basically whatever learner you currently have selected, the information you see below is going to be related to that learner. So throughout the course of this training, I'm going to go ahead and stick with my student Tom. Now we shorten the last name for confidentiality. It's always the first and last letter. But I can see that I have Tom's profile selected. And again, all the information below is going to be related to Tom. So if I go in and make any edits or complete any of these actions, I am specifically doing it for Tom's account. Now, if you need to change this learner to a different learner, because you're going to go in and complete some actions for that specific learner, then you can go ahead and click on that purple tab or your student selector. And this will open up your student selector from the right-hand side and provide you two different ways that you can select for your different students within the system. The first option that's selected, and this is often the default, is searching by account. So when you have that option selected, you can see that there are 3 white bars that you can click on to filter through. And for example, mine's going to look a little bit different than yours, but when you click on that first white bar, you guys are personally going to see access to ACE Practice, and then of course Bancroft. The ACE Practice classroom basically provides you with a bunch of fake profiles. These are profiles that you can jump into to practice different tasks within the website. So for the duration of this training this morning, or anytime after the training that you want to go in and just practice some of the items that we reviewed today, or if you're just going in and sort of clicking around and attempting to do some of the different features or functions, I strongly encourage you to select one of these practice profiles. That way, when you go in and do some button pushing, you're not going to affect your actual learners. And again, you can do anything within these profiles. You can add things, remove things, edit things. So for those of you who are logged into today, just go ahead and select one of these practice profiles. That way, as we go through the different features and functions, you guys can practice, again, without affecting your actual learners' accounts. Then eventually, when you guys are ready to work with your actual learners, if you click on that first white bar, instead of going to the practice classroom or school, you can go to Bancroft. And depending on how your account is set up, the school and classroom may automatically load for you. I currently have access to the entire account. So for example, when I search via the school, I can see the different schools that are assigned to the Bancroft account. But here, VPF might automatically load for you. And then again, depending on how your account was set up, the classroom may also automatically load for you as well. If you have access to more than one, you can click on that third white bar and sort of select whatever classroom you need to go into. And when you do that, the learners that have been assigned to that school and classroom are going to pop up below. So once you've seen the learner profiles that you're going to be going in and working with those individual learners, all you have to do to select their profile is if you're using a mouse, you can see that the profile picture will highlight in blue. Or if you're using a tablet, just go ahead and click on the profile picture. And when you do that, it will load that specific learner's information. Okay. So now I can see that I have selected Jayla. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I can see that this will include information about their account. And as you go through and complete any actions within these different items below, again, it's going to specifically reflect this learner's account. The other option for searching for your learner is when you click back on your student selector or that purple tab. Instead of searching by account, you have the option by searching by student name. So when you click on that option, you can basically start typing the learner's name in. And as long as you have access to whatever learner you're typing in, their profile should pop up below. So in this case, I can see Tom's profile. I can click on it. And again, now I can verify that I have currently selected Tom's profile and all the information below is related to my learner, Tom. So as we go through the different items and features today, strongly encourage to make sure that you always have the correct learner profile selected, especially when you guys begin doing stuff for your actual learners. You don't want to accidentally, for example, activate a program for a different learner because you didn't go in and select their specific profile. So always verify that you have the correct learner selected. And then if you need to change that, you will use that student selector icon to do so. Any questions about selecting your individual learners? All right, guys, before we talk about some of the features in the Learners app, this is a good opportunity to take our first break. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. We'll get back about 9:26, 9:27-ish. And when we get back, we'll talk about some of these features within the Learners app that you guys can set up for your individual students. Guys, I will see you guys in 5 minutes. I'll be here if there's any questions. I'm just going to turn off my microphone, but I'll see you guys in 5 minutes. Hi, guys. We're going to go ahead and get started again. We're going to highlight 2 features in the Learners app for today's training. So once you sort of go through and make sure that you have your correct learner profile selected, the first item I want to highlight is in this Learner Details widget. This is a feature that you're going to see across the curriculum app as well, but this is somewhere you can go in and edit some information within this Learner Details. And to do this, in the upper right corner of that widget, you're going to see 3 horizontal lines. And this is what we refer to as an action menu. So anytime you see this within different items across the different apps, when you click on those 3 horizontal lines, it basically allows you to complete a further action. So in this case, I can go in and edit some information within this widget. Now, you guys don't have to worry about the information above. Here you will basically see some of the information that's sort of written in stone. As the learner was set up with their account within the system, this is information that our help desk added. But as I scroll down, you can start to see some items that you can go in and change the information for that specific learner. So for example, this is where you can indicate the learner's grade. For any learner following a service plan or IEP, this is where you can indicate that plan year. And then whatever start date that service plan or IEP may have began on, you can also enter that information as well. If for any reason this is not applicable, there is an option to score that as well for that specific learner. But what I strongly encourage staff to do before you do anything within the system, after you set up your security questions, of course, this is the first area you would go just to enter this information about the system or about that learner that you're going to be working with. And the reason it's important to update this information is because some of the items, especially with regards to different reports that you might be utilizing later on, it's going to pull from the information here. And for example, depending on what learner you're working with, you can pull information for whatever IEP or service plan year they might be currently working on. And there's a potential report further down the road that we're going to review that you guys will be able to use the service plan start date for in order to identify how much time has elapsed for that learner's current service plan or IEP. And you can use that specific feature to see if the learner's on track towards meeting their specific goals and objectives that you set up. All right, so just important to make sure that this information is updated, especially for a learner that is working on a service plan or IEP. And as those change, you always want to come back and edit or update this information. Directly below that, don't worry so much about the quarters. This will sort of automatically set it at every 3 months. When you guys are generating reports or gathering information on the data you've entered into the system in the future, especially for the reports that you generate yourself, you can go in and customize or identify whatever your date range is for how far back you want to review the data for. It doesn't have to be the past 3 months. You can go back and get data for the past 6 months, the past year, a week, 2 weeks, whatever it might be. You guys can decide what that is. At the very bottom, the service details, you don't have to worry about this section. This is for related to collecting or entering behavior data. You guys don't currently utilize the system for that, so don't worry about completing that section. All right, but again, you just want to make sure the grade, the service plan year, and service plan start date is up to date for any learner that you're going to be working with. At the very bottom of that, once you sort of edit that information, just go ahead and make sure to hit save. And that save button will definitely be a theme throughout as you complete different features and functions within the system. Just making sure that you go back and save whatever edits or changes you made. The next feature I want to highlight with everyone is what we call the Manage Learner Profile. This is going to start us into the process of going in and starting to activate and potentially edit the lessons that you're going to be working on with your individual learners. But before I go into this Manage Learner Profile feature, I want to pull up what one of our lesson plans look like. At this point, since relatively everyone's new and either have logged on late last week, during the weekend, or potentially this morning, or haven't got on the system just yet, I want to share with you what some of our different lessons look like, depending on the program type, and sort of just quickly walk you through some of the different sections and highlight what items you can sort of go through and edit and customize for that individual learner. So the first lesson I want to show you is a skill acquisition lesson. And to do this, I'm first going to pull up the lesson details for you, and then I'll share the corresponding data sheet. So this is what an ACE lesson plan looks like. When you go through the process of activating and identifying what lesson is most appropriate for your learner, this is the access to the information that you're going to be able to review. And anytime you sort of review one of our lessons, you can sort of see it's broken down into different sections. And across each of these sections, you guys are going to be able to go in and customize and edit some of these to better fit this lesson for that individual learner that you're activating the program for. I'm going to quickly go through each of these sections. I want to make sure that everyone is familiar with sort of the different terms and procedures that you guys might be using. And please let me know if there's any questions that come up, or if any of these are not that you're not familiar with. I'm happy to elaborate if I need to. But this is for a skill acquisition or that discrete trial program that we sort of talked about in the beginning of the training. And the idea behind it is, whenever you first see a lesson within our lesson library, every one of these sections is going to be completed, but it's going to be filled with default information. So the idea is, as you go through the activation process, there's a way to apply that learner profile that we're going to talk about in just a couple minutes. as well as going into the lesson itself to make individual edits. So this lesson is, again, customized for whatever learner you might be activating this program for in the future. But I want to go through these different sections, just highlighting some of the different terms and procedures. And the first one that you guys are going to have access to is what we call our lesson objective. This is the statement that's going to let you know what exact requirements are needed for the learner to master the goal or objective that you're going to be activating for the individual learner. So this is a program for following directions. But within this statement, it basically provides you with everything you need to know in order to meet this objective. So for example, we have included here generalization criteria. The generalization criteria relates to how many people or how many settings are required in order for the learners to master that goal or objective. So in this case, you might want the learner to complete the program across more than one person and or potentially more than one setting to show that they can generalize the skill across those different items. Whatever that generalization criteria is, it's going to be up to you guys when you're activating a program for an individual learner. And this might be different across the learners that you're going to be working with. But you guys will be able to decide how many people or how many settings are required for the learner to meet that goal. Then you guys are going to have access to sort of a statement. This is letting you know exactly what the learner is expected to do for this current skill. So in this case, again, this is about following directions. So anytime a learner is given a verbal direction in a group setting of 2 or more learners, the learner will demonstrate that action. Then in the objective statement, you're also going to be able to identify the percentage. This percentage is indicating the number or percentage of independent correct responses the learner needs to achieve in order to meet the goal. This is something you, again, can customize. Whatever percentage is appropriate for that learner or however the program is set up, you guys can decide what that is. And then finally, you're also going to be able to see, depending on what that percentage is in this case, how many sessions for this program type, because you run it across sessions, are required for the learner to meet the goal. So this is basically saying that the learner needs at least 80% independent correct responding across 2 consecutive sessions in order to meet the goal. Again, this is something that you can edit or customize. And what you may also see with some of the lessons, depending on your entire goal that you might be working on, is for a specific program, you can let the ACE know, in this case, how many total directions are required in order for the learner to meet that goal or objective that you're going to be working on. All right, so overall, not 9 directions at once, but across the entire, for example, IEP year, we want the learner to master a total of 9 different directions. Great. So everything you need to know in order for how the learner will meet the goal is located in that objective section. And again, these are the different items you can customize. The instruction section talks about what materials are needed for the program. Again, there's going to be default materials that the ACE recommends that you have, but you can always add or customize these. We'll talk more about these edits when we get into the learner profile and editing the program. But again, I'm just walking you through the different items, providing some general information about each of these terms and procedures. Reinforcement. This is what you typically provide when a learner responds correctly. The reinforcement schedule that you're going to use for that learner is up to you guys. It's often sort of defaulted that you might reinforce every correct response the learner completes, whether it's independent or whether you provided some type of help or prompt. And the reinforcement refers to verbal praise, physical attention, high fives. You might give a toy or activity. You could give an edible or some type of food item, or you could deliver a token, depending on the learner's reinforcement schedule. But those are some examples of reinforcement that you might provide anytime the learner gets a correct response. Correction procedure. This is going to be a procedure that you will follow anytime the learner gets an incorrect response. And there's some different options for how this can be completed. But again, you guys will be able to edit and select that. But it basically walks you through exactly whenever an error occurs within a program, these are the steps you should take in order to correct that mistake. And then it's going to show you what type of data you're going to collect. And as you work through a program, depending on what type of program it is, where the student currently is within that program, you may either be providing different data options, depending on both the teacher and learner behavior. But for example, those include either plus or minus. That means that the learner either responded correctly or incorrectly independently. No help was provided. Or we have a plus P or minus P. These are responses that the learner either responded correctly or incorrectly. But during those responses, the teacher provided some type of help or prompt. So we want to make sure that we indicate whether help was provided or not, and whether the learner responded correctly or incorrectly. Next is the procedure section. Here it's going to walk you through exactly what you need to know in order to run or implement the lesson. So the first thing I want to highlight is for this type of program, depending on the complexity of the program, it's going to be broken down into what we call levels and sublevels. Some programs, when you sort of activate this type of program, is only going to have the one level that you need to work on. But as that program becomes more complex, it's going to be broken down into different levels. So here's an example of a program that only has the one level. And this is a program where you're really just working on following directions in a group. So you're not really building on the skill at this time. But in this case, the one item that you want the student to complete is being able to follow those directions well in a group setting. When you move to something more complex, you might see that this has multiple levels. And let me pull up an example for you guys so you can sort of see what that might look like. For this program, this is looking at describing items by feature, function, and category. And when I come down to the procedure section, I can see that instead of just the one level, this actually has 3 different levels that you would work on throughout the entire program. And the reason for this is if you go back to the sort of definition of what a discrete child program is, when we work on this type of program, we break it down into smaller units. So when you're working on a program such as describing the items by feature, function, and category, when you present specific targets or items to the student, it's a lot for them to sort of let you know exactly what the feature, function, and category for those items are. So instead of working on all 3 of those at once, you can see that the level breaks down the program, where level 1, you are only teaching the student to describe the items by the feature. Level 2, you're only working on describing the items by the function. And then level 3, you're teaching the student to describe those items by category. So by the time you work through all the levels, they will be able to describe the objects that you're presenting by the feature, the function, and the category. But as you work through those levels, you basically introduce another component or part of that program. All right. So those levels relate to skill complexity and how the program might be broken down based on how many items you might be teaching across that particular skill or program. Then it's going to provide information about what you as the teacher should be doing for this program. Here is where you're also going to be able to identify what type of prompt or help you're going to provide. And there are different types of options for the different types of help and prompt that you're going to provide. And you guys that are setting up the programs will be able to decide what exactly this is. But for this type of program for skill acquisition, we do often what we call a most to least prompt or airless teaching. And the idea behind it is that we don't want the learner to make errors from the get-go. We want to try to eliminate errors from occurring. So whenever this program goes into training and you're starting to teach the learner how to complete this specific skill, you are always going to start off with the most intrusive or restrictive prompt. And when you look at this prompting strategy, you can see that will be step 0. In this case, step 0 is oftentimes always an immediate prompt. And then there's criteria that we're going to talk about for how to move up and down these prompting steps. But remember that we want to systematically fade out these prompts so the learner will eventually respond independently and correctly. So as the learner begins to meet that criteria to go to a less restrictive prompt and you begin working your way down, you can see that the prompts become less intrusive. So instead of providing an immediate prompt for step 0, when you go down to step 1, for this type of prompting strategy, you first provide 2 seconds for the learner to respond independently. And then if they don't respond independently, you provide the help or the prompt. As they work their way down to step 2, you now provide a 4-second delay. You give this learner 4 seconds to respond independently. And then if they don't do so within those 4 seconds, you then deliver the prompt. And then finally, that third and final step is independent. This is where you go in and give the chance or give the learner the chance to respond independently without providing any type of help. So at this point, you're seeing, can they respond correctly and independently across the trials that you're presenting? Now, this specific type of prompting strategy is what we call a time delay. This is one of the options that you guys will be able to choose from. I'll highlight the other options a little bit later. But I just want to highlight that when you're delivering the prompt, this is, again, is referring to the type of help that you're going to provide. Depending on the program type, you guys will also be able to choose what type of prompt type you're going to provide. So this will be dependent on the student in the program. But in this case, for example, since this is a following direction program, it's often common that you might deliver a physical prompt with this type of program, where anytime you're providing the help, you're going to be providing physical help for the student to complete those directions. And then here you can also identify what exactly you're looking for the learner to do. For this program, we want them to follow the direction. But some items within this specific section, you're going to be able to go in and customize or edit. Then we have what we call our instructional plan. Here for this program type, you're going to see what we call sublevels. And the sublevels are going to correspond with exactly what targets you're going to teach the student at that time. Remember that we break this program down into smaller units. So even though our overall goal is that the learner will be able to do 9 different directions, we commonly would not introduce all 9 directions at once. That might just be too much information. We want to break it down so the learner makes progress and eventually masters the skill. So in this case, depending on the student, you can decide how many targets you're going to present across each of the different sublevels. Now, a lot of times when you see an ACE program, the default number of targets the ACE might give you is 3 across each of the different sublevels. Again, you guys setting up the programs can decide if you want that to be 3. You might decrease it down to 1 or 2, or you might increase it to 4 or 5, depending on the learner and how many actual targets you can present at one time. When you see the lesson details for a specific program that you're going to activate, the ACE will provide you with default targets that you can teach, but you guys setting up the program can decide what those ultimate targets are. You're going to make the ultimate decision of what exactly directions you're going to teach across the different sublevels. You can use the ones that the ACE provides, but you guys can also go in and customize and edit those as well. And we're going to be talking about that when we go into editing. But again, just highlighting how the program is broken down across the different targets that you might teach. And again, you can see there's a total of 6 different sublevels for this one. And across most of them, there's introducing 3 targets, with the exception of that first one. In this case, you're only going to introduce the 1 target. And here it's going to let you know, again, across what instructions and response you're expecting from the learner. Then as I go down to the next section, this is talking about criteria. So when it's referring to criteria, this is letting you know, as you work through those different prompting steps that we talked about earlier, what criteria is needed for the learner to move to a less restrictive prompt, or what criteria is required for them to go back to a more previous prompt. In this case, they're probably making too many errors. And you guys will be able to customize and edit this and decide exactly how many sessions the learner has to achieve, or how many consecutive or total errors can occur when the student meets criteria to go back and work on a more restrictive prompt. So if I scroll back up to the prompts, this is basically the criteria for when a learner is going to go from step 0 to step 1, step 1 to step 2. Basically, they're working their way through. Those prompts are becoming less intrusive. Hopefully, they're becoming more independent at the skill. Or again, if they're on maybe a step further down, but they happen to make too many errors, then the next session has to go back to the previous prompting step, basically indicating to us that they need more help. Remember, we don't want those errors to keep happening, so we want to make sure that we go back and provide more help if needed in order to promote correct responding. And then finally, there's a section on assessment, basically just giving any prerequisites that might be needed. What to do for baseline, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, and what to do for maintenance. Any questions about the different terms and procedures, though, that I highlighted through these different sections for this specific type of program? All right, guys, the next thing I want to do is I just want to pull up a video that's going to show what this type of program looks like. Again, some of you guys might be familiar with this, but if it's relatively new, it's sort of going to walk you through the steps that you as the staff would take, sort of highlighting some of these procedures and terms that we just talked about. And then we'll go on to the next 2 program types and review those before we talk about how to go in and edit or customize the different sections. All right, so this is again a video for skill acquisition lessons, talking about the program that we just sort of highlighted and reviewed.
Skill acquisition, or essay lessons, are taught using a discrete trial format. Skills are isolated and practiced across many trials. These lessons are recommended when a learner benefits from highly structured learning environments, reduced distractions, repetition, and consistency to acquire new skills. These are the steps in an essay teaching session. First, prepare for the session. Arrange the environment for teaching. Minimize distractions. Gather lesson materials and backup reinforcers. Prepare for the trial by arranging the materials as directed in the lesson. Gain the student's attention. Deliver the instruction according to the teacher behavior listed in the lesson.
Count the money. 5, 10.
Observe the learner's response and compare it to the target learner behavior listed in the lesson.
Nice job, Luke. That's 10 cents.
Immediately provide the relevant consequence as directed in the lesson, reinforcement if correct, or an error correction procedure if incorrect. Collect data to record the learner's performance on that trial. Begin again by immediately preparing for the next trial.
Count the money.
5, 10, 15.
Nice job, Luke. That's 15.
One teaching session usually consists of several fast-paced trials in a row.
Count the money.
5, 5, 10, 15, 20.
Nice job. That's 20 cents.
Ready?
Count the money.
5, 10, 15.
Nice work. That's 15.
If relevant, provide a prompt as prescribed.
Ready?
Count the money.
5,
10
10
cents.
cents, 20,
15 cents.
15 cents. That's
That's
15.
15 cents.
Hi guys, so that was an example of, again, what a skill acquisition program looks like. There's a variety of different skills you can teach that way. So no matter what level or type of skill it is, whether it's, again, you're working on simple attending or simple discrimination skills, such as establishing session behavior, if you guys are working on simple discrimination or simple matching, a variety of skills can be taught that way. And you guys will be able to find these within, again, our lesson library when we get into the way to search for the different lessons across that. Let's go back to the ACE here. And one of the skills you guys might be working on, again, set up as a skill acquisition, is matching like identical objects. So really working on sort of that prerequisite before you start working on more advanced matching, or even working on matching identical objects to help with the potential learner's communication skills. So here's another example of what that lesson looks like. Again, walks you through the same series or different sections. Same thing as before, the different items I talked about. You guys are going to be able to go and customize or edit some of these items. But for this program, again, you're just working on simple matching different objects. And again, when you get down to the point of choosing what different items you might be presenting, you guys can decide ultimately what's important for that learner to learn with regards to the different objects you could be matching. So in this case, you can sort of see they're broken down in sets of 3 again. But this is a skill that, again, you might be targeting with one of your individual learners, really getting to work on that specific matching skill. And then if this is something they can already do, or they eventually become independent at it and are able to respond correctly and independently at that high percentage, you might then move it to pictures and then eventually do picture to object matching or object to picture matching. So there's a way to sort of progress depending on what current skill you're working on. So maybe those, again, slightly more complex skills as you move forward. All right, guys. The next program type I want to share with you as we go through the different lesson types that you guys are going to have access to is what we call an incidental teaching program. So again, just walking you through the different items that you're going to be able to have access to depending on how you're setting up that program. So this is, again, sort of an early communication skill that you might be working on. This is for requesting assistance. You might just also think about simple requesting sort of functional communication responses. This could include like requesting just specific items that the student wants to have available, requesting attention, requesting assistance, things like that. But for this type of program, you're going to notice some differences as I walk through the different sections. A lot of the sections are going to match what we talked about for the other program type, but there are going to be some key differences based on how this program type is set up. So here again, we're going to look at this for requesting assistance. The objective statement is going to look very similar. It's going to have any generalization criteria that's required. Again, letting you know exactly what the learner is expected to do and what percentage of independent correct responding is required. One of the big differences with this lesson type is instead of across sessions, you typically do this across weeks. And the reason for this is because these are a program that you collect data across programmed opportunities. So you don't run sessions of data with this type of lesson. You collect single opportunities of data as they either occur naturally within the environment, or you as the staff arrange the environment in order to collect data on that opportunity. So for example, when running this type of program, you might only collect data on a program, maybe like 3 or 4 opportunities one day. Maybe the next you get 10 opportunities of data. Maybe after that you only get 1 or 2. Maybe the following day, then you get 3 or 4 again. So there's no set number of data points that you need to collect. Again, it sort of will vary across the day. But when you sort of calculate all those data points together, you look at the data across a week, again, rather than looking at it across the different sessions. Again, here you have the ability to identify what materials are required for the program. Here you can see that there's a section for environmental arrangement. The idea behind this is, again, when you collect data on this program type, it might occur naturally within the environment. So for example, if you're heading to the playground and the learner cannot open the door independently, and you know this, you want them to request help in order for you to open the door for them. That might just happen naturally as you guys are going to the playground. But if you want to set up or arrange the environment in order to collect data on that opportunity, maybe when the student's going to leave the classroom, you might make it so they can't open the door. And that way they would have to request help in order for you to assist them, but you can go ahead and collect data on whether or not they did that independently or required help to do so. So it just provides information for you as a teacher for how to go ahead and sort of set up that opportunity that you can collect data on. Next is going to let you know the different types of responses that you're going to collect. And the big difference with this type of program is the way that you provide the help. For the last program type, we talked about providing what we call most to least prompting, or during errorless teaching, where you first provide the help and then you systematically fade that help out. With this type of program, we do what we call least to most prompting. So we sort of reverse what we do. And here we give the chance for the learner to first respond independently. And then if they can't respond independently or they don't do so, then we start to provide help. And that help that we provide becomes more and more restrictive. So here again, we give the chance for the learner to respond independently, and then we provide help. And based on the criteria and how long we need to wait for the student to respond, that help becomes more and more restrictive until hopefully the learner responds correctly with whatever help we provide, or there's a chance that they could respond incorrectly. And the reinforcement that you typically provide for this program type is actually what we refer to as the natural consequence. Because for this type of program, it's typically whatever they want or might be requesting for example. So if the goal was for the student to go to the playground, but the door is what's preventing them from getting there, and they have to ask for help for us to be able to open the door for them. Once we open that door, the natural consequence the learner's commonly getting in that case is the ability that they can go and now access the playground. That's not to say that you can't still say good job or provide some type of other reinforcement, but oftentimes with this program type, the reinforcement is typically the natural consequence. For this program type, when you go through the editing process, instead of seeing different levels or sublevels, you're going to see what we call context. And the context can be edited, basically letting staff know when or how they should be collecting the data for the program that you might be working on. So for example, this context is very specific of when you should be collecting data for when the student should request help. And here you can sort of see some examples of any time they have difficulty obtaining a snack, zipping an item, completing a puzzle, or opening a door. You guys could make these more generic. They could just say classroom. And basically what that would represent is any opportunity that the student has to request help within the classroom, you can go ahead and collect data on. And then your next context could be the cafeteria, the hallway, and so forth. So basically you're collecting data across different settings. But in this case, staff will know exactly when and how they should be collecting data based on how those contexts are added for that program. And then again, you have a section for criteria, assessment, what to do for baseline, and what to do when the student eventually masters the program for maintenance. So some key differences when you run this program type, but again, some of the same procedures and terms that we talked about before. So I'm going to pull up a video for this program type just to show you some examples of what the trials would look like or the opportunities of data you would collect.
Incidental teaching, or IT, lessons are taught using a naturalistic environment teaching approach. Naturally occurring events are used to teach skills in the context of their actual motivational conditions. Opportunities for learning are arranged throughout the day when they would be most likely to occur naturally. These lessons are recommended to generalize previously learned skills to new contexts or to teach new skills in a less structured environment. These are the parts of an IT teaching session. First, arrange the environment as directed in the lesson to create a learning opportunity. You might also identify a naturally occurring opportunity in vivo.
Let's go outside. Put on your socks.
Observe the learner's response to the opportunity and compare it to the target learner behavior listed in the lesson. If relevant, provide a prompt as prescribed.
I need help. All right.
Immediately provide the relevant consequence as directed in the lesson. Reinforcement if correct, or an error correction procedure if incorrect. Natural consequences are typically used.
One sock. Sock on.
Collect data to record the learner's performance on that opportunity. Begin again by arranging the environment for another opportunity. The next opportunity usually occurs after some time has passed. IT opportunities are usually taught one at a time and spread out over time, rather than all together in one session.
Put on your socks. I need help. Sure, let's put this sock on. Whoa. One. Put on your shoes. Let's put on this shoe. Nice job. There goes the Velcro. One more. Nice job. Last shoe. Push. Get that heel in. Big push.
Hi guys, so just an example of what that program type would look like as you collect data across the different opportunities. Any questions so far about the different procedures or terms or the two lesson types that we reviewed? All right, so our third and final program type I just want to highlight and review is what we refer to as task analysis. Again, this is your chain of behavior that you typically break down into smaller steps. I'm going to pull up an example for you guys. So again, think of something like a hygiene skill or a specific skill that you might break down into individual steps depending on how you want to teach that skill to the student. So looking at like applying hand sanitizer, very relevant, especially during this pandemic. This is a program that could be set up and taught as a task analysis. So when you go through the program and you see the different sections and lesson details, some of this is going to be very familiar with the terms and procedures that we already highlighted. But again, some key differences with how this program is set up and implemented with the learner. So here again, this is for apply hand sanitizer. You have access to the objective statement, letting you know exactly, again, how many people, how many settings. In this case, for a task analysis, they typically need to complete the entire chain independently in order to potentially meet the goal or objective. And then again, how many trials in this case do you need to do that across? One of the big differences here is the chaining sequence. When you run a task analysis, there are 3 types of chaining sequence, depending on how you would teach a skill to the learner. There's what we call a forward chain, a backwards chain, and a total task. So this one's going to highlight a forward chain. And basically what a forward chain task analysis represents is that when you run or collect baseline data with the learner, and you basically identify that they either don't know any of the steps in the chain, or maybe they just know the first 1 or 2 steps within the chain, but then the majority of the responses after that were incorrect. You might commonly use what we call forward chain task analysis to teach that skill to the student. And a forward chain basically moves forward through the chain. So for example, this type of task analysis is a total of 6 steps. That means that you're first teaching the first step that they don't know how to do. Let's just say, for example, step 1. And then before going to step 2, you first teach them how to independently and correctly do step 1. Once they do that, you then go to step 2 and you teach them how to do step 2. Once they can independently and correctly do steps 2, at this point, they can already do step 1 independently. You then introduce and start teaching step 3. So the idea here is that you only teach 1 step at a time. And as you work through this type of chain, you're moving forward from the beginning to the end of the chain, teaching each of those steps in order. So that would represent a forward task analysis. There's another one called a backwards. It's sort of just direct opposite. Instead of starting at the beginning and working towards the end, you actually start at the bottom of the chain and you work your way backwards to the beginning. And those are typically used for learners that might know the bottom steps of the chain independently and correctly. So you basically start with what they already know and then work your way backwards. And then there's what we call a total task chain. This is basically when you work on all the steps of the task analysis at once. So you don't work on 1 teaching step. No matter how many steps make up that chain, you allow the student the chance to respond independently, and then you go and provide help when needed in order to complete that step correctly. And again, you collect data on all the steps of the chain rather than just the 1 teaching step for a forward or backwards chain. All right. I'm going to share where you can access more information about these different types of programs and chains for task analysis. Again, just providing you with some information about the different items you may come into contact as you sort of go through and set up programs for your student. Again, you have materials, exactly what you should do to prepare for implementing this type of program, what you as the teacher should be doing or saying for the initial instruction. And again, looking at the type of help you're providing. And typically for a forward or backwards task analysis, you go back to that most to least prompting or that airless teaching that we talked about for skill acquisition or discrete trial, where when you first put the program into training across each of the different steps you're teaching, you provide the most amount of help, and then you begin to systematically fade that help out until the learner can do the steps independently and correctly. I'm going to get to that question in just 1 minute. As soon as I'm done reviewing the different sections here, I'll try to elaborate on that question. Here it's going to let you know what to do if the learner responded correctly or incorrectly. Again, you typically provide some type of reinforcement. Otherwise, you provide a correction procedure. Here it has information about what to do for the task analysis. For example, what to do for those untaught steps. Because again, you're only teaching one step at a time when you run a forward or backwards chain. And then here is right now the 6 steps that make up this task analysis. The nice thing is whenever you run this type of program, you guys can modify or edit these steps. You can add additional ones, you can remove some, you can change the order of them. So again, you guys will be able to customize how this program will look in the end when you implement it with the student. And then again, there's a section for identifying the criteria and how the learners are going to move up and down the different prompting steps or teaching steps for this specific type of program. Again, there's a section for what to do for baseline, what to do when the learner eventually masters the specific program. But again, some of the terms and procedures are similar, but slightly different with regards to how you implement the program. So before I get to that question, I'm going to pull up an example of at least what a forward task analysis looks like, just so you guys can sort of see some different trials and what it would look like if you implement this type of program. And then afterwards, we're going to start going in and looking at how to actually be able to start customizing the different sections for whatever programs you're going to be working on with your students. So let me just pull up that video first.
In a forward chaining sequence, the steps of the task are taught one at a time, in order, from first to last. These are the parts of a TA teaching session utilizing a forward chaining sequence. First, prepare for the session by arranging the environment for teaching. Gather materials and backup reinforcers. Minimize distractions, position yourself behind the learner, and gain their attention. Deliver the initial instruction as listed in the lesson.
Hold the towel.
Allow the learner to complete mastered steps at the beginning independently. If an error is made, provide the most restrictive prompt. At the teaching step, prompt as prescribed. Then provide the consequence as directed in the lesson. Reinforcement if correct, or an error correction procedure if incorrect.
Nice job.
Finish the task by completing the rest of the untaught steps as directed in the lesson, by providing full guidance, by the teacher completing the steps him/herself, or no completion, or skipping the rest of the task. Collect data to record the learner's performance on that trial. Finish the lesson by immediately beginning the next trial, by starting over with the initial instruction.
Hold the towel. Nice job. Hold the towel. Nice job.
Okay, guys, so that was just again an example of a task analysis. So you got to see the 3 different program types. Any questions about the task analysis or the different sections that you would potentially go in and review or edit when setting up that program type? All right, so there was a question about the math session. can we see in the program how her data was recorded? Can you just elaborate on that question, exactly what you're referring to?
So where's that data in the system? Where's that page?
I'm going to be showing you guys the data sheet that you're going to be collecting the data on. We're going to be highlighting where that is located and reviewing what the data sheet actually looks like that you're going to be collecting your paper pencil data with when you're actually implementing the program with the students. So we're going to get there in just a little bit later so you guys can sort of see exactly what data sheet you're going to be using. All right, guys, if there's no questions, we're going to take another 5-minute break. Let's go ahead and reconvene at 10:25. When we come back, we'll go back into our Learners app and start talking about that learner profile and what you can do before you even start activating lessons in order to customize and identify what you want these potential lessons to look like as you activate them for a specific learner or student. So I'll see you guys in 5 minutes and we'll get started again on the learner profile. Hi guys, we're going to go ahead and get started again. So the reason I wanted to sort of highlight each of the different program types and some of the different procedures and terms, because now we're going to talk about a feature that I strongly encourage everyone to use and utilize. And it's called the learner profile. And what this feature allows you to do is as you begin to search for lessons to activate for a learner, and depending on what those different lesson types of programs that you might activate for that learner in the future. Remember that you can customize and edit some of the different sections within those lessons. The learner profile is a great feature, again, found in your learner app that you can go in and let the ACE know across many of those different sections that you're going to see in future lessons you're going to activate, what some of those lessons or sections you want to customize and edit, and how you want them to look for any program that you're going to activate for that learner in the future. So for example, when you go to the app library, and I'm going to jump back into the Learners app, before setting up the learner profile, you want to make sure that you have the correct learner selected. So again, I'm going to go ahead and stick with Tom. And when you go into that Manage Learner Profile widget by clicking on it, what you're going to notice is it's going to show you some of the sections that we highlighted as we reviewed the 3 lesson types. So the objective section, instructions, prompts, criteria, and so forth. And what you can do and what I strongly recommend is before you even activate any lesson for your learner, I would come and complete this learner profile for whichever learner you might be working with. And you can do one for each learner that you might be activating programs for. And what you want to think about is across all the lessons that you might activate for that learner, what would you want these different sections to look like? So the idea is that this can be applied to any learner or any lesson that you're activating in the future. And what it will do is based on the selections that you apply in your learner profile, it will automatically edit and change these different items that you select to any lesson that you activate in the future. So instead of going into each lesson that you activate and go through each section one by one and edit it and edit it and edit it and then do it for the next lesson and so forth, which can take a lot of time, the learner profile can ultimately save you a lot of time because a lot of the sections that you might go into a lesson to edit can sort of be selected here. And you can identify exactly what you want these sections to look like, again, across the majority of the programs that you're going to activate for that learner. So what I would do is if I was going to activate programs for Tom, I would think, what do I want the majority of these sections to look like? And what would his lessons typically look like as I go forward? So for example, for the objective section, you have the ability to identify across all of the programs you might activate for Tom, what would be your generalization criteria? How many people and how many settings would have to be required in order for his goals to be met? Then you can also identify across what, depending on the program type, how many weeks or how many sessions does he have to achieve in order to meet that goal. And remember, this is going to correspond with that percentage of independent correct responding, but does it have to be across 3 consecutive sessions, 2 consecutive sessions? Does it have to only be across 1 week or 2 weeks? And you can see in each of these different drop-down menus, you can choose exactly what that criteria would be. You also have the option of keeping lesson-specific options. This will sort of just pull from the default that the ACE typically has. And depending on the program type, that might differ depending on what type of program it is. Then when you go down to the instruction section, here you can identify what to do for reinforcement. So when the learner gets a correct response, what would you do? And you can see there are different options you can choose from. Again, whether they respond correctly, you can reinforce each correct response. You can reinforce only the independent responses, or you might wait to provide that reinforcement till the end of the activity. Whatever you do for this student, you can select. And then you have some options for what you might do when the student makes an error. So exactly what procedure would you follow when an error occurs, and what would be the teacher responsibility to do when that error occurs. Then for prompts, here you have the 3 lesson types. What would be your typical prompt fading strategy that you would use for that program type? So for skill acquisition, you can see there's a variety of different options you can choose from. Remember, for this program type, we often use that most to least or airless teaching prompting. So you're often selecting typically between the time delay, which is a most to least procedure, or the most to least fading intensity procedure. Each of these are pretty common for the skill acquisition with regards to completing airless teaching, but you would choose the best one that would fit that learner with regards to how they're going to, how the teacher is going to provide prompts during that program. Task analysis, again, you can choose your typical prompting strategy. And then for incidental teaching, remember that the default or common procedure to use is least to most for this. So you could just go ahead and select that, or if you kept it as lesson specific options, the default is always going to be least to most. For any prompting procedure that's least to most, this will help you identify how long the staff should wait before they move to the next prompting step. In this case, the default is about 3 seconds, but you guys can again change that duration to either be more or less. Maybe some learners will need more time to potentially show that they can respond independently or correctly do the response that you're looking for before you move on to the next prompting step. So in that case, you might give them a longer duration to show whether or not they can do that. Then the criteria for each of the 3 program types, you can decide how many sessions or how many errors need to occur in order for the learner to move to the next less restrictive prompt, or the criteria for them to move backwards to a more restrictive prompt. So again, you guys can make the ultimate decision. An example is, when you're working like a skill acquisition program or discrete trial program, and you have a learner that you might want to provide more practice to before they move to the less restrictive prompt, because again, you want to try to eliminate those errors from occurring. Oftentimes, you might choose between 2 or 3 consecutive sessions at the same prompting step, where they have to show that percentage of correct responding before they move to the next less restrictive prompt. You might see this be changed to a 1 for a learner that does acquire skills quickly. So maybe they don't make a lot of errors, they don't need as much practice. So they might only need to spend 1 session on a specific prompting step before they can move to another one. But again, you guys know the learners best, so you can make that selection. And you can do this for skill acquisition, incidental teaching, and task analysis. Then there's a section that talks about how you would set up your task analysis, depending on what typical types of TA programs you would use for that specific learner. So here you can choose the typical chaining sequence that you would use. What would you do for the untaught steps if it was a forward or backwards chain? And then how many trials would you like to complete that task analysis for? And then we have maintenance. Maintenance is run once a student masters a specific set of targets or a specific program, depending on how that program is broken up. Once that program moves into maintenance, you guys can decide how often you want to run that or those maintenance sessions. Oftentimes they might get thinned out a little bit. They don't often or aren't often run as often as a program that's in training. That's something that you might do at least once a day. But when they eventually masters a set of targets, you might only collect a maintenance session once per week. And this just makes sure that the student doesn't lose what they previously acquired or mastered. You want to make sure that they can still maintain that skill at a high percentage of independent correct responding. The lesson alerts you guys don't need to worry about right now, since you guys will be collecting paper pencil data. This is a feature related to Teach Now or that paperless data entry. You can go ahead and turn them on just in case any paperless data is collected in the future. There's a couple of features that will sort of help the staff with the data collection process. But right now, even if you turn them on and you collect paper pencil data, it's not going to affect the programs or lessons that you're activating. So just in case you do ever decide to collect paperless data in the future, feel free to turn these on, but we're not going to review these in detail today, as we're going to focus on that paper pencil data entry. And once you set this up for the program or the student, you would just go ahead and hit save. And again, this is a really nice feature because one, it will help save time so you don't have to go into every program that you're activating and make the same edits over and over again. If your generalization criteria is going to be consistent across all the programs you're activating, the learner profile will easily do that for you. There are still other sections within the lesson that you might go in and edit further. We're going to talk about that in just a couple minutes when we go over editing. And the nice thing about the learner profile is it helps to keep your programs consistent. So you're using the same type of prompts, the same criteria, depending on what type of programs you're activating for that student. And anything you do within the learner profile is not written in stone. So any of these selections that you make here, you can always go back to the lesson that's activated and further edit that lesson and change any one of these sections that you've completed or filled out in the learner profile and customize it further for that one individual lesson if you ever need to in the future. And I'll again highlight this when we go over editing. Any questions about the learner profile though, on the different sections that you can complete, why you would fill it out or use it for a specific student? And I'm going to show you how, once the learner profile is completed, how you can apply this to any lesson that you might activate in the future. I just got a couple questions that I want to highlight and review. So the first question was, is it correct to possibly use incidental teaching for students whose responses are more reflexive than intentional? That's entirely up to you guys with regards to what type of responses you're expecting from the learner. Again, incidental teaching is really just working on a program or skill as it occurs across different opportunities, either naturally within the environment, or again, you guys are arranging the environment in order to teach that skill. Incidental teaching can be used to teach a skill to a learner. It's also used oftenly maybe after you set up the program using discrete trial or skill acquisition, and you sort of taught the student how to respond or whatever specific skill you're teaching. Once the student can independently and correctly do that, for example, via tabletop across multiple trials and sessions, then you might introduce it as incidental teaching to start generalizing it to other contexts or environments. So if your responses are a little bit more reflexive than intentional, and I think what this represents is how the students are going to respond, you can do that through incidental teaching or discrete trial. You guys can be the ultimate deciders of what the response should be. But for a specific program, it really depends on what you want the student to respond to. So for example, if you're working on requesting assistance, is it the requirement is that the student is just really supposed to request help or help please, whatever that might be. And is that your one and only response that you can collect? Or can they do it a variety of different ways? Can that help be something different? Can it mean the same thing? You guys can ultimately decide how the student will respond and what type of responses are going to be correct for that learner. You're welcome. And then we have, if we are collecting paper data, will we then be transferring it into this program? Yes. So the idea is that once you have your data collected via your paper pencil data sheets, there is a way to enter it back into the ACE. That way you will start generating reports and graphs so you can monitor the learner's progress. Good question. All right, guys. So really, again, before you start activating programs, once you set up the learner details, I would then recommend filling out the learner profile for whichever students you might be working with. Again, you can set this up for each individual student. Again, going through the different sections and identifying what their programs might look like as you begin activating and setting up those programs. All right, guys. So now what we're going to go into is back to the app library. And now we're going to jump into the curriculum app to highlight how you would go about activating and searching for these lessons to activate for your student. This will always be done in the curriculum app. So from the app library, I'm going to go ahead and click on that curriculum app. Remember that this will send you to the dashboard. And before I search for any lessons for a student, just make sure that you have the correct student selected. If not, use that student selector to change your student profile. And when you're ready to search for a lesson to activate for a learner, you are going to use this Find Lesson widget. All right, you might have to scroll down or to the side to see it. But here there are two ways you would sort of search for a lesson. The first one is typing in a keyword. So if you know what type of general lesson you're looking for, you can enter a keyword for that lesson, and it will provide you any lessons that we have in our lesson library that either have that keyword in the title or a potential lesson that's tagged with that keyword, depending on what type of lesson it is. When you guys are using the keyword, I just recommend keeping it simple. We typically recommend using the root word when possible. And what I typically recommend is only putting like one word in the keyword search bar. The more words or the more complex it becomes, the less likely you're going to find a match in our lesson library. Again, we have over 2,100 lessons available, so there's a really good chance that you're going to be able to find a lesson within our lesson library that matches what type of skill you want to teach the student. But sometimes it's just a matter of that we call it something different than what you guys call it. So when in doubt, you know, it's probably there. It's just a matter of maybe changing the keyword that you're using. And I'm going to talk about our help desk at the end of today's training, but when in doubt, we always try to encourage you guys to search for the lesson, at least a couple of different tries or opportunities. And if you still can't find the lesson you're looking for, you're going to be able to reach out to our help desk, let them know exactly what type of skill or lesson you're searching for. And based on that, whatever you might be looking for, the help desk will provide you some recommendations within our lesson library that you can choose from. So when in doubt, you can always fall back on the help desk to help you search for a lesson. All right, but again, the first option is the keyword. The second option is clicking on this Browse by Scope. So when you click on this blue button, this is going to bring you to a page that will allow you to search for lessons across different scopes. And some of these scopes are definitely not going to be applicable to you guys. But if I happen to click that drop-down menu, you can see the 4 scopes that we have. And the first one is what we call the ACE scope. This is actually our scope and sequence. So basically, this is sort of where the lessons are broken down across the 10 areas that I highlighted earlier. Based on the program type and skill area that you're looking for and the complexity of the program, you can sort of use the ACE scope to filter down to a specific area to find a skill and eventually the lessons that match up with that skill in our lesson library. We do have the VB map. If any learner has completed a VB map in the past or currently, you could also search for lessons in our lesson library that match up with the VB map, different milestones and areas. You guys can ignore the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks. We do have Common Core. If this is relevant, it does go up to 5th grade, so you could search for the lessons across the different areas within the Common Core. But no matter what option you use, whether you decide to use a keyword or the browse by scope, it will basically lead you to the same spot where your end result is seeing the different lessons that we have in our lesson library that match up with whatever skill you're looking for. So I'm going to show both examples. Can anyone give an example of a lesson that you might target with one of your learners? Or any skill that you're sort of looking for to potentially find a lesson for? Any examples?
Greg, if I may interrupt, I would like to ask our teachers, can you please bring any of the examples of lessons that you would like to see in ACE? Because so far I know we saw some very high level lessons. Any of the IEP goals that you have?
Maybe identify colors.
Yeah, all right, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys. So if you're looking for a program to identify colors or indicate colors, there's a couple of different ways you can search for that again. When you go to the curriculum app and you go to the Find Lesson widget, if I just happen to put the word color in, that's pretty general. You're going to get any lesson within our lesson library that has that word in it. And in this case, there's actually 42 different lessons. Doesn't mean that they're all going to apply depending on what type of skill you're looking for. But basically, you can sort of see the different lessons in our lesson library that have the word color either in it or potentially associated with it. And at this point, once you sort of see the list of lessons, you can sort of go through and try to find the best lesson that matches how you want to teach that skill. And there's a couple of things you want to attend to. Anytime you see the list of lessons before you sort of go in and start finalizing what actual lesson might be best for your student. And here you can sort of see the lessons are broken down into groups of 10. And as you begin to search for a lesson, the first thing you want to pay attention to is this status column. Now, for many of you guys, this will be blank. But as you begin to activate programs in the future, if a program has been selected and activated for a learner, it's going to say active within this column. Or you're seeing some examples of the program saying archived. What that means is the program was worked on already, and it's at some point in the past, it's been archived, meaning that the student's all done working with it. So that program is currently in our archived program section, representing that, again, the student has already worked on that program at some point in the past. But again, you're probably primarily going to see blank, meaning that those lessons were not activated for that specific learner at this time. And as you go through, the other thing you want to attend to is the type of lesson that you might activate for the student. This is where it's going to indicate any of the 3 program types. And you're going to see the abbreviations for SA for skill acquisition or discrete trial, TA for task analysis, or you may see IT for incidental teaching. And for a lot of you guys, since you might be working on a lot of those early level skills, maybe not so much the more complex skills, depending on the learner and student, be aware of what type of lesson you're activating, especially for a lot of the prerequisite skills or those early level skills that you might be working on. Oftentimes there is a skill acquisition and an incidental teaching version. They might have the same lesson name, but you want to make sure that you correctly activate the correct version or type of the lesson, depending on how you're going to teach that skill to the student. And then finally, the lesson name. Here it can sort of give you a clear indication of what that might look like, indicate name colors, match colors, so forth. Some of these lessons will have abbreviations in front of them. So OT, for example, stands for occupational therapy. That might be a lesson that falls under that specific area or domain. Sometimes you're going to see UAE for United Arab Emirates. That's a lesson that you definitely won't want to select. It's related to our school in Abu Dhabi. It might have Arabic in it, for example. Sometimes you're going to see the letter CS in front of it. That stands for core skill. And that is representing that it's an early level prerequisite skill that you might be working on with the student before moving on to something more complex. And then other examples are, you could see like ACAD, just representing that it's an academic skill. Also, at the end of the lesson, sometimes they're going to have parentheses. And within that parentheses, it might provide more information about what type of lesson it is, or what type of response you're looking for from the learner. So for example, you can see that we have two naming colors programs. You can see that one is a vocal version of the lesson and the other is the motor version. So if the learner is able to provide a vocal response, you would want to choose the vocal version. Or if you're looking for a lesson that requires a motor response, they're using their AAC device or any other type of motor response in order to provide the answer, then you can go ahead and select the motor version. All right, so you can sort of drill it down to exactly how the learner might respond for that particular skill you're going to work on. Then you have a couple of options. Once you've identified a lesson that you think is going to work for your student, and just for this sake, to show you what, to walk you through the activation process, I'm going to choose one of these naming color programs. If you were working on indicating the colors, you might choose that first one, but I can see that it's already been archived for my students. So I don't want to select that at this time. But if I identify that I want to work on naming colors and I'm going to look for a motor response, if I know this is the program I want to go ahead with, I don't need to look at the lesson details. This is exactly what I need to work on for their IEP. I can click on the checkbox next to the ID number. I can go up to the upper right corner directly below the student selector. You guys will see those three horizontal lines. I can click on this and you can see there is the option to activate this lesson. But before I activate it, maybe you want to see the actual lesson details. Okay, you want to go in, you want to see how the program's set up to identify if that's appropriate for your student or not. In this case, you can click on any of the blue ID numbers to go in and see the lesson details. So for example, I can click on 1555. This will bring me into a page to go in and start looking at the lesson details. And I can go through the different sections that we highlighted earlier. Keep in mind that this is all default information. Nothing has been edited or customized as of yet. But you can at least get a good general idea of how the program is set up. Examples of what targets you might teach a student, but again, these can be edited or changed. And once reviewing this, you can decide if this is the appropriate lesson to go ahead and activate, or if you need to go back and choose a different lesson because maybe this doesn't match how you want to teach the skill. If it's not the lesson you want to teach, and you want to try to activate a different lesson, you can use the quick links above to go back to the search. And this will show you the list of lessons that you're still looking at, and you can choose a different lesson to review. Or if I go back into that lesson, because maybe this is the lesson I want to go ahead and activate at this time, after reviewing the lesson details, I can then click on the action menu in the upper right corner. I don't have to go back to the search menu to do this. And when I click on that, again, you have the option to activate the lesson. So at this point, I can go ahead and activate this lesson. And you have two options. You can activate the lesson as is. I'm going to talk about how you can apply the learner profile in just a minute. Or you can choose to activate and edit the lesson, which basically means even if you apply the learner profile, there are still specific areas or sections that you might want to go into to further customize that lesson for that student that you're going to use this program for. And one of those is commonly the instructional plan. Again, the ACE will provide default targets for you that you might work on with the student, but you might want to go in and change these entirely, which you can definitely do. So at this point, you might choose activate and edit. No matter what option you select, you're at least going to activate the program. And no matter what option you select, once you hit the submit button, before you officially activate the program, you're going to be sent through these 3 boxes. You have to complete these before you go ahead and activate the program. And that first box is going to ask if you want to keep the default lesson settings, or this is where you can apply the learner profile settings. So if you took the time to set up a learner profile with your students, you can go ahead and make that selection. And once you activate the program, it will automatically go through and edit whatever sections you applied in the learner profile. So you don't have to go back and do that manually. Right, so again, this is a little bit of a shortcut to make the lessons the way that you want to when implementing this with this lesson with that particular student. The next section is allowing you to choose the IEP year that this program is going to apply to. So make sure that matches up with their current IEP, or if it's going to be a new IEP, whatever it might be. And then before we activate, you also have the option to change the lesson name. You don't have to use what the ACE calls it. Or in this case, you might at least want to just get rid of the parentheses, and you still might call it name colors, but in this case, you don't want the word motor to be present as well. And then finally, the objective number, anytime you activate a lesson, it's always going to default to 0, 0. I strongly encourage you to give each objective its own objective number. This could be any number that you'd like it to be. This could match the IEP goal number if you want. You could just do a simple 1, 2, 3, 4 as you continue to activate more lessons. Some staff will make them domain specific. So for example, the communication goals might be 1s, 1.01, 1.02. Social skills might be 2s, 2.01, 2.02, and so forth. But it's nice to give each objective its own objective number because when you generate reports later on, or when you're searching through your lessons, once they're all activated, they're going to be defaulted and ordered by objective number from lowest to highest. So that way you know exactly where that objective is within that list. So I'm going to go ahead and give this 61.0. And once you complete those items, depending on what way you decided to activate it, once I go ahead and hit activate, the lesson is going to let me know that it's successfully activated. And since I chose activate and edit, it's bringing me directly to the page where I can make further edits for this lesson. Okay, if you just chose activate, it would have activated the lesson for you, but it would not bring you to the page where you can make further edits to the lesson. Any questions about searching for a lesson using the keyword and how to go through the activation process? This works the same way or is very similar if you happen to use one of those browse by scope features. So when I go back to the curriculum dashboard and navigate to the find lesson widget, when I use that browse by scope feature, I'm going to use the ACE scope as this might be a common scope that you might use to search for lessons across. But again, it will sort of drill down to what specific area and skill you might be looking for. So here we can see the 10 areas that I look for lessons across. Some of these skills might be those early prerequisite skills that you want to target. So again, if I go to discrimination as an example, here you can see these are broken down into different columns. So if you're working on attending or session behavior, simple discrimination in identity matching or arbitrary matching, you can find the best skill that targets what program you want to work on. And these are in a loose developmental sequence. So when you see the skills labeled in the different columns, the skills up top are going to be less complex. And as you work your way down, they become more complex. So you can sort of also search for the lessons that way, depending on the complexity of the skill you want to target. And once you've identified what skill you might want to work on, let's just go ahead and say matching identical pictures. Once I select that skill, it's going to show you the list of lessons that we have in our lesson library that match up with that skill that you just selected. And again, you would go through, identify if these were already worked on, if they're currently active, what type of lesson you want to go ahead and activate, and then again, looking at the lesson name to help identify what type of lesson you might want to go ahead and select. And just like before, once you sort of identify the lesson, you can always click on the blue ID number. This will send you into the lesson to go ahead and select or identify if this is the lesson that you want to go ahead and activate for that student. And just like before, if it is, you can go up to the action menu, choose to activate, and then complete that same process of either activate or activate and edit. Just like before, no matter what option you select, the ACE is going to ask if you want to apply the learner profile. Make sure to choose the correct service plan year. Again, you might just change the name of the skill to be matching. Give it an objective number. And again, you would click activate. And again, I chose activate and edit. So at this point, it's bringing me to the editing section where I can then make further edits to the different program that I just activated. Any questions about activating using the browse by scope? And really either method works. It just depends on what you guys prefer or how you want to drill down to what type of lesson you're looking for. I'm going to give you guys, for those of you who are logged into the ACE, just a couple minutes to sort of go back to the curriculum app, use that find lesson widget, either play around with the browse by scope or enter some keywords, see what type of lessons come up. And again, if you're doing this, just make sure you're on a practice student. But you can use this to sort of go through our lesson library and see the different lessons that might match up with the different IEP goals that you might be working on. So I'm just going to give everyone a couple of minutes to do that. And then we'll go over how to edit the program once they're activated.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I have a student with a goal to keep educational items on a tray, on his lap tray. When I go to type in on the search bar, it doesn't give me anything. What would I do then?
So can you give me some examples of the words that you typed in?
Let's see. I typed in keep educational items on tray. I don't know what else to put in there. I'm trying to come up with.
So that's a good example of a sort of a very specific goal that you have targeted for that learner. What I would recommend is this is where you can email our help desk, provide them with the goal or lesson name that you're looking for, and any additional information would be helpful, however the goal is written or set up. And then they will at least be able to go in and provide some other recommendations for you. We might have some goals that match what you're looking for. It may not be exact. So I will put that out there that depending on how your goals were written or developed, you're not going to find word for word or maybe 100% exact matches. The recommendations that the help desk provides you, it might require some editing on your end to make that goal work. But there is probably some type of lesson within our lesson library that you can at least start with and work on with that individual student for that specific goal. So even at the end of today's training, once I give you the help desk information, you can let them know that that's the specific type of goal you're looking for. They'll provide you with some recommendations, and then you can look at those recommendations to see if any of those will work. And again, we're going to go over editing in just the next minute or two, so you can sort of see how you can go through and customize some of the sections to maybe modify that lesson to best fit that individual student that you're working on that skill with. Good question, though. So that's important. Again, just keeping in mind that you might not find a word for word or 100% match. It might just require some editing, taking a lesson that was already sort of developed and tweaking it a little bit to sort of match whatever goal or skill you might be working on with that student. Any other questions or any thoughts on some of the examples that you have, or you're practicing just putting in that keyword bar or browse by scope? All right, guys, I'll just give one more minute and then we'll go into editing the lesson. All right, guys. So once you have lessons that are activated, you've gone through, you search for them either via the keyword or browse by scope. Again, you have the option to edit the lesson as soon as you activate it. I sort of highlighted that a couple different times as we were going through and activating a lesson. But there's other ways you can always go back and edit your lessons. And I want to walk you through how to do that, as well as how to go through and edit the lesson across the different sections. So what happens is as you begin activating a lesson or lessons for a student, when you go to the curriculum dashboard, and depending on what learner you have selected, you are going to see this view lesson widget. And it's going to let you know how many lessons you currently have activated for that learner. So for Tom, I currently have 19 lessons. And in order to see these lessons, I can click on the orange checkbox to go into my active lesson list. When I click on that, it's going to show me any of the lessons that I went in and have activated for that learner. Then you're going to see little checkboxes next to each objective number, depending on how you set those up. And when you click on one of the objective numbers and you go up to the action menu in the upper right corner, directly below the student name, you have the option to do a lot of different actions here. And one of those is edit. So again, you can edit the program once you directly activate it, or you can come to the active lesson list and always come back and make further edits to any lesson that's already been activated for a student. So from here, if I go ahead and click edit, this will bring me to the page where I can go in and make edits to the different sections of the program. Now, these highlight exactly what we reviewed earlier. And some of these are familiar, also seen in the learner profile. And I'm going to talk about some of the different items you can go through and customize for the learners across these different sections. Lesson details is just giving you information about the lesson name. So in this case, this is for match identical objects. The scope and other libraries, you don't have to really worry about this. This is sort of where it falls within the different scopes across the ACE. So depending if it was in our ACE scope or VBMAP or the different frameworks and things like that. But as you go down to the objective section and you open that up by clicking on that tab, you can see that anywhere there's a white box or a drop-down menu, you can go in and customize these different sections. Now, some of this information already has been completed or filled out. Or this is being pulled from the learner profile that you set up and applied to this program. So for example, as I activated the program, I already gave it an objective number and service plan year. Here, if I applied my learner profile, this is pulling and letting me know exactly what my generalization criteria should be. So in this case, how many people or settings is needed for the learner to master the goal. Here is where you guys will see your lesson objective. So exactly what requirement and how the goal is written for the student to meet that goal. Now, we understand that you may not write your goals, especially for IEPs that are currently in place, exactly how our lesson objectives statements are written. So there is a learner objective box directly at the bottom of that section that allows you to go in and type however your current learner objective goal is written. And whatever you type in this box will show up on future reports, for example, or any type of data sheet that you might generate. So the idea here is that you can have your learner objective within the program based on how you guys wrote it with regards to what requirements are needed for the learner to master that specific goal or objective. But as you activate programs in the future, you might just start pulling our lesson objective. Basically, it will be nice and easy to copy and paste it and apply it to your IEPs that you're going to create in the future. That way, it's very consistent with how you're implementing the program with the student. What you also want to do, especially if you write your own learner objective, is make sure that in these drop-down boxes here, you make sure that these match with however your goal is written. So again, this is providing you a default mastery criteria of 89% correct independent. You might want to change this to 80% because maybe that was the goal for your program. And again, some of this information is being pulled from your learner profile. But if you ever have to go in and edit this, you can definitely change the number of sessions or the total number of targets that you expect the learner to master across the IEP year. And as you make any edits or changes to any of these items, just make sure to hit that save button. Every section has its own save button, so make sure you're hitting save before you move on to the next. And when you hit save, you are sent to the instruction section. Here's where you guys can go in and customize the materials if you like. You can make them very specific. You could use what the ACE currently has in there, or you could add on. Here is where your reinforcement and correction procedure was selected. And again, this is being pulled from the learner profile if you went ahead and activated and set that up. One thing you can do in the editing section that you can't do in the learner profile is if you don't want to use one of our pre-populated reinforcement or correction procedure options, when you go through editing the program, there is the option to choose other, and you could create your own reinforcement or correction procedure if you wanted to do something different for this program or for that learner. And again, if you did make any changes, so make sure to hit save. The procedure section, this is one of the sections where you can't customize everything. So while we try to give you as much flexibility to modify this program to match that individual student, one of the examples that you can't edit is the initial teacher behavior or learner behavior, exactly what you should be doing to run the program and what type of response you're expecting from the learner. You can see that you can add additional information though, if you want the response to be slightly different or how you expect to teach the skill. You also can't add or edit the different levels, but you can change the level name. So instead of having that, you can just say matching objects. Here's where you can always come back and change what type of prompt or what type of fading procedure you're using for the program. Again, this is being pulled from our learner profile. But if you ever have to come back and change this to something different, you can easily do so. And depending on the program type, you can also choose a different type of prompt type for how you're going to provide the help. Are you going to use a physical prompt? Are you going to use a gestural prompt, or that would be like a point prompt? Are you using some type of visual prompt? So again, will depend on the student and how you're going to teach that skill. And very important is to make sure that you choose the correct data block selection for how you guys plan to collect data across that program. This is going to match up, or you want it to match up with how many targets you're planning to teach across the different sublevels, for example, for this program type. and how many trials you're expecting the staff to collect data on, and how you're going to present those items. So for example, when you happen to see the default for the instructional plan, a lot of times the ACE will show you a default of teaching 3 targets at a time. But again, you guys will have the flexibility to make that less or more. But if you do happen to teach 3 targets at a time, that's why you see a default data block selection of 9 trials. Basically, that allows each target to be presented 3 times each across those 9 trials. So there's that repetition or practice that the student will get throughout that session data. And if you want to see what the data blocks look like before you select it, you can go ahead and choose whatever data block you're going to decide to implement for that program. But if you happen to change the number of trials that you're going to, or the number of targets you're presenting at one time to maybe only 2, then instead of doing a 9 trial, you might change that to a 12 trial 2 stimulus array. Basically meaning that you're going to show each item 6 times each throughout that session. Or you might just do a simple 10 trial data sheet, basically showing each item twice during those 10 trials. But it's important that you identify what data block selection is correct based on the number of targets you're presenting and how many trials you want to complete, because whatever selection you make here is what's going to show up on the lesson data sheet you're going to generate to collect data on this program. And again, once you make your selection, you would go ahead and hit save. The instructional plan is the section I talked about earlier that you might come back and edit the most, because even though the ACE provides you with default targets, it does not mean that you have to stick with those targets. You can customize or edit these. And there's a lot of things you can do once you get to the instructional plan to let the ACE know exactly what targets you're going to teach for that skill. So for example, depending on how many sublevels are already within the program and what targets those might be, you can decide to move them up or down. So if you want to teach, for example, toothbrush first, I could slide that all the way to the top. To the right, you're going to see some different items that you can click on or icons that you can select. When you have targets that are first introduced via the ACE program, there is going to be a red trash can that you can click on to remove or delete that sublevel. So you don't need to go and work on it if it's not relevant to your student. Or if you want to go in and just edit what the targets are, you can definitely do that as well. So again, even if the ACE tells you that toothbrush, paper, marker are 3 items that you might teach the student how to match, if these are 3 targets you don't want to work on or you want to get rid of one of them, you can go ahead and edit that sublevel by clicking on that blue and white paper pencil icon. It's going to open up your this little pop-up window showing you what the targets are. And as I mentioned before, you can get rid of them entirely and add your own targets. As I mentioned, you don't have to keep it at 3. You can keep adding more. Or you can go under 3 and you might only introduce 2 targets at a time. Whatever it is for that specific program and student, you decide what the targets are and how many you're going to teach across the different sublevels. So once you make your selections, you hit submit. Those will show up across whatever sublevel you created that for. And then most importantly, you're going to save it. That way it will show up on your future data sheet. All right. Don't worry about these other 2 icons at this time. I just want to really show you how you can go in and edit and customize the different targets that you might be working on. And the last thing you can do is, especially when you first work on a program and you activate it, the ACE might show you a default of 4 or 5 or 2 or 3 different sublevels. Again, maybe each sublevel will have 3 targets. Just because the ACE only shows you 3 or 4 or 5 different sublevels does not mean that you can keep adding more sublevels. So if you're working with a learner that's acquiring a lot of skills and you want to keep introducing, in this case, objects to match, once you get down to the last one and maybe they can match all these different items that you presented, Then you can go ahead and keep adding a new sublevel to introduce new targets. And to do this, you can just click on that white bubble, go up to that add sublevel button. And here you can go in and add new targets. And once you go ahead and hit submit, it will add those targets to that new sublevel for you. So you can go ahead and keep collecting data on more and more targets as the student begins to master the previous ones that you worked on. So it's really up to you guys. You can sort of customize and edit how many targets and what those targets are across the different sublevels that you might introduce for this program type. And if you did make any changes or edits or additions, just make sure to hit that save button. And the last section I want to highlight with you is the criteria section. Here is where you are going to see the ability to go in and customize how the learners are going to move up or down those prompting steps. Again, this is pulling from the learner profile, but if you ever have to go back and make changes to it, this is where you can do that. So any questions about editing the program further, even if you apply the learner profile? All right, guys, I'm going to use the quick links above to go back to the curriculum dashboard. The last thing I want to highlight what you can do is accessing the data sheet so you can start collecting data with your students. And again, to do this, once you have the program activated, you went through, you applied the learner profile, you maybe made edits to the program. This is again going to be in that view lesson widget. And you can access those data sheets by clicking on the active lesson or that orange checkbox or checkbox. Here, what you can see are again, the different programs that you've activated. And when you want to go through and set up or generate a data sheet for that program, what you can do is click on, again, any of the checkboxes next to the lesson that you want to generate the data sheet for. And once you select that, you can go up to the action menu. And that last option says generate data sheet. When you click on this, this is going to allow you, depending on the program type, to choose what level or sublevel, what context or what chain, depending on the program type, that you want to generate the data sheet for. So this one currently has 3 sublevels. So if you know what data sheet you want to generate for based on what targets you're going to teach the student, you can go ahead and make that selection. And when you hit submit, it will open up in a new window or tab. And this will automatically generate that data sheet for you, so you don't have to make it from scratch. And what you have access to is basically any staff collecting the data will have the information up top needed to implement and run the program. So from your lesson plan, it only pulls the relevant information needed to actually go through and collect the data. So for example, you have the mastery criteria that staff can review. There is the teacher behavior, exactly what the teacher should be doing. What exactly are you expecting from the learner with their response? What type of help? So the prompting strategy or fading procedure that was selected for this program. So they're going to know exactly what type of help to provide. What to do if the learner responded correctly or incorrectly. When to give less help or more help. So exactly what criteria needs to be met in order to move up or down these prompting steps. When they should be contacting a supervisor. And again, just highlighting what the mastery criteria is. And the nice thing is at the very bottom, you then have data blocks. So the staff can simultaneously collect the data as they review the information above. So when you print this out, everything will be on one page for you. And when you see the data blocks, again, it will depend on what type of data block you selected. But here's where staff can go in and fill out information that they're doing for that session of data. So here they would record the date, their initials, what type of setting were they in, and that would be really important if it did require more than one setting in order to meet the goal. You would have to make sure that you're doing this across at least 2 different settings. They would indicate the prompting step that they're on. And then for the session, you can see these are differently abbreviated. BL stands for baseline. That's sort of your pre-test, what you might first do to see if the learner can do the skill independently or correctly. If they can't do it independently and correctly by meeting the mastery criteria, you then might put it into training and collect training sessions. This is where you provide the help, and then you systematically fade that help until they respond independently and correctly. And then once they meet that mastery criteria, then you collect your maintenance sessions. Again, making sure that they can still do what they previously acquired and mastered without losing the skill. PR is a probe session. This is when you test the student's ability during teaching. Don't worry about this trial type unless you guys are instructed to implement or run a probe session. Typically, you start off in baseline, you move into training, and then you collect maintenance data once the set of targets has been mastered. And the nice thing about this is when you generate the data sheet, depending in this case, for example, what sublevel you selected, it will already have the targets indicated for you, so staff don't have to write those in manually. So they're going to know that they're going to be collecting data on red, blue, and green across these different sessions of data. And then at the very bottom, you have the option to print this out. The nice thing about these data sheets is you can go in and you can customize the data sheet, so you can add additional information or remove some information if you needed to. Just be aware that any edits you make to this are only to the data sheet. It doesn't go back into the program. And then, for example, if you did make any edits to these, you go ahead and save it. That way, there's a way to access the saved version of the data sheet in the future. But then you can just go ahead and print that out. And the last thing you can do is, since you only get 3 data blocks, you can add additional rows of data. And for example, if you add about 3 additional rows, when you print this, if you can print it front and back, you will still have the information to run the lesson on the first page with the 3 data blocks. And then on the back, you have additional data blocks that staff can go through and collect data on. So this is a little bit of a save you some paper, so you don't have to go in and generate a lot of data sheets with only 3 data blocks on them. And again, you can print this out or save it to access it in the future. Any questions about the lesson data sheet or how to generate it for any of the lessons that you might activate for a student? Hey guys, in terms of information, because we're almost done with our session today, I'm going to go ahead and stop there. Before I do end though, I just want to quickly go over the help resources because we did cover a good amount of information today. And I want to highlight where you can go back and get access to different resources to either review the information that we covered today, or if you want more information about the lesson types and the different procedures and terms that you might be using or seeing across the programs, there's areas within the system that you can access that as well. To access different resources, these are always going to be located in the app library. So when you're in the app library, if you scroll down to the very bottom, you're going to see the Help Center and Learning Center. These are our 2 help resources. And I'm going to first talk about the Learning Center. So when you click on this, this is going to open up in a new window or tab. And when you guys do it, you're eventually going to see this open up a page that looks like this. What happens is it takes some of the different apps that you see in the app library and breaks them down into tabs. And what you can find in the Learning Center is what we call help articles. And there's basically an article for every single action you can think of. And you can find those articles based on the different apps that they fall in. So for example, we talked about the curriculum app. If I go to the curriculum tab, and once you click in that tab, it sort of breaks it down by the different things you can do within the curriculum app itself. And if I scroll down, I can see that there's an article for how to activate lessons. So this is one of the things that we talked about today. And when I click on that link, this will give you an article. And the article are step-by-step instructions. They include screenshots and links to other areas within the system that you can review. And basically this walks you through step-by-step on how to go through and activate a lesson. You can download these, you can print them out, you can save them to your desktop, or you could just view them on screen. But again, there's basically a help article for every single thing that you can do. So you can use that to find those different articles. Directly below the ACE logo, we have quick links to go back to the previous page or two. I'm going to go back to the first page. And I do want to highlight a feature in the Get Started tab. When you click in here, it's going to give you information about how to navigate the system and so forth. But there's also a feature called Learning Pathways. I strongly recommend every staff to use this. This will give you access to a variety of different resources, both found in the Learning Center and Help Center. So this is sort of like your go-to area to navigate to if you want access to a lot of different resources. And what you can see is that we broke down different roles and responsibilities that staff may have. And once you've identified your role and responsibility, or the one that matches up closest to it, when you click on that link, it will walk you through a series of topics. And you can go to the topics that are most relevant to you. But as you go from topic to topic, it's going to show you exactly what articles, what tutorials, these are videos you can watch. You can do some active clicking in them. We have PowerPoints, we have videos that you can review. Some are shorter than others. Some areas we have recorded webinars that you can watch. But the nice thing about it is as it takes you from topic to topic, it really shows you what resources we would encourage you to review. And the nice thing is everything's available across these different links. So you don't have to go back and forth from the Help Center and Learning Center to either access an article or one of those, what I like to call media related resources. And here's like a good section if you want to go back and review some more information about the 3 lesson types or the different prompting procedures that you might follow. You can go through and learn more about the different lessons, or the lesson types, I should say. Then it goes into finding and activating lessons. So we talked about this today, but this is where you can go back and access some information. And then eventually we'll go into how to enter your paper pencil data back into the ACE. But there's some information in here how to do that. And then eventually ways that you can analyze the data you're collecting. A lot of good resources available within here. And again, the benefit is you get access to a lot of different resources across the different topics that are relevant to what you may be using within the ACE itself. So again, that's located in the Help Center, Get Started tab, use the Learning Pathways. The Learning Center, I'm not going to go into this. I know I'm over my time. I apologize. But here is where you can find the media related resources. So these are like those tutorials, those PowerPoints, those recorded webinars or shorter videos. This will open up in Blackboard when you click on it. And there will be a link that says My Classes that you can click on. And it will say ACE Learning Center. And if you want, you can go in and find those media related resources in here if you're just looking for those specific items. But again, if you use the Learning Pathways, you can really find the links to those items there. So you don't necessarily have to go back and forth from the Learning Center and Help Center. And last but not least, we have our Help button in the lower left corner. You can use this to find the articles within the Help Center if you happen to use that search bar. Or this is a way to contact our help desk. And there's actually 3 different ways you can reach out to our help desk. There are 4 representatives that work Monday to Friday, minus holidays, things like that, from about 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. You can reach out to them with any questions you have, whether it's about how to do something, or as I mentioned earlier, if you're trying to find a lesson that matches your goal or objective, you can give them that information and they would be happy to provide you with some recommendations of lessons that you can choose from. When you click on that little help icon, there's a leave us a message button at the very bottom. You can click on this to provide that information to them and they'll get back to you via email. Or the other ways to reach out to them is they have an email address, acehelpdesk@nec.org. You can email them anytime. They also have a 1-800 number if you want to call them and talk to a representative. Right, so those are the different ways you can contact the help desk. I strongly encourage everybody to reach out to them anytime you guys have a question, or again, you might need some help finding a lesson. They'll be more than happy to help you guys. They're very quick in their responses. I included my email here. You guys have it from the invite, but just in case you need to want to write it down, you can reach out to myself as well. I'm happy to assist you with any questions that come up. Some staff already did. Again, for those of you who had trouble getting onto the system, I'm just going to ask that you wait till tomorrow when our help desk gets back. They'll be able to help you get back to setting up your password and getting onto the system. But any questions about the features or items that we talked about today, or trying to find a lesson, I'm also happy to help you guys with if you want to email me as well. Okay, guys, any questions about the help resources? All right, guys, we covered a lot of information. I know this is the first time you're seeing the system, so I hope you guys don't feel overwhelmed. Again, we're going to take it through this slowly. As questions come up, just feel free to reach out to the help desk or myself. We're eventually going to meet again. We're going to have Q&A sessions in the future. We're going to talk about how to eventually enter the data back into the system and review any additional features that you might be using in the future. Now is just a good time to sort of start exploring our lesson library, trying to find some of the lessons that might match up with your goals. Taking the time to set up that information about your learner, setting up a learner profile. So those items that we covered today, I would definitely encourage you guys to sort of begin practicing or start setting them up for your individual students. And as I said, if any questions come up, just feel free to let me know, or the help desk. If there's no questions, thank you guys. I look forward to working with you all. I will see you guys again in a future training. And if there's any questions, just reach out to us. If there's any questions that staff do have, I'm happy to hang on for a couple more minutes and ask those or answer those if I can. If not, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.